Today, I'm speaking with Amelia Miller, who, along with her sister Lydia, has founded the innovative job platform Ivee. It is a space dedicated to helping women return to work. Now, that might not sound like our usual topic, but when I met Amelia, it quickly became clear that there is a powerful human interest story beneath the tech. In fact, there are thousands and thousands of powerful human interest stories. And I am delighted to be able to share some of that with you today. Welcome to the Henny Flynn podcast, the space for deepening self-awareness with profound self-compassion. I'm Henny. I write, coach, and speak about how exploring our inner world can transform how we experience our outer world, all founded on a bedrock of self-love. Settle in and listen and see where the episode takes you. Okay, Amelia, so lovely to see you here. Really is. I loved our initial conversation when we very first met, and I'm delighted that we're going to be talking today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to see you again. And yeah, I'm really excited about the conversation we're going to have.
Yeah, and me too. And I know, I mean, even just in like the couple of minutes that we've had just before we started recording, that this is very much a kind of live conversation as well. You know, this work that you're doing is really, really present moment. And so it feels really exciting actually to be able to listen to you and to understand the work that you and your sister are doing. Before we kind of dive into that, I'd really love to ask you to paint a picture for us. I know when we first spoke that you talked about the struggle that you saw your own mother going through when she had a career break. And I'd love to hear some of that story and also to hear how that has, you know, in part kind of influenced you and your sister Lydia as well.
Definitely, yeah. So we're sisters, myself and Lydia from London, and we we formed the concept of Ivy, as you say, after watching what our mum went through. She was a chartered accountant, and throughout her 20s and early 30s, she rose very quickly to director before taking some time out of the workforce to raise a family. And we watched firsthand how unbelievably difficult it was for her to get back in. I mean, it was 2 years of constant applications. I remember once I was in the room when she was on the phone to a recruitment agency that literally put the phone down on her when she told them her age. And in our mum's case, she ended up taking a 60% salary cut to return, not as an accountant, but as a local receptionist. And it was horrible to watch. And not only was it a massive drop in her initial earnings, but it also completely affected the trajectory of her future earnings. And you know, she's now been stuck in that same job, no promotions, no pay rise for the last 10 odd years. And when she re-entered, she had a 25-year career left ahead of her. And this movement of women back into much lower paying fields that they get stuck in, and they don't have the same career progression. This is the crux of the gender pay gap, and you know, we can go onto this in a bit more detail. But this is it's known as the motherhood penalty, and we very quickly realised that our mum was not alone, and this happens to the majority of women that return to the workforce. And we know and firmly believe that if we can solve this return to work part of the journey, we can solve the gender pay gap, and that's what we're on a mission to do with Ivy.
And I mean, I just want to call out the fact that, so this is 10 years ago that your mum went through this experience, 10 years ago, which feels like such, you know, it's so present, isn't it? It's not like you're saying, you know, it was in the 60s and, you know, my mom had this experience and we're still struggling. It's actually very, very, very present. And I think it really underscores the reason, well, the passion between you and Lydia for this work, but also the reason why it's so important.
It's also, sorry to interrupt there, but it's also, you also might think, oh, 10 years ago, that was a while ago now, but actually the problem is not getting any better. And it's actually getting a lot worse in some parts of the world. In the UK, for example, we, out of all of the OECD countries, we just performed the worst in terms of our gender pay gap statistics in the back end of 2023. So it's still a huge problem now more than ever, and there is limited work being done to solve it. So it's definitely not got any better in the last 10 years, unfortunately.
And I mean, I think that's a really sobering point, the fact that things have actually got worse. And I'm also really mindful of the impact that this will have had on your mum's sort of own personal well-being, sort of facing into that. And I mean, it sounds like that must have been incredibly hard for her.
It was. I mean, it was so hard for her, and we've spoken to hundreds of women returning to the workforce over the last year, and she's by no means alone. Every single woman we've spoken to has these exact feelings of complete, anxiety about their return to work journey. But the main thing and the main theme we pull from all of our conversations is a loss of confidence, and that can be present in a woman that's had a 6-month career break all the way up until a 25-year career break. A loss of confidence that comes from leaving the corporate world is absolutely huge and is ever present in these women, and that is also regardless of the reason for their career break. We know that the majority of women leave the workforce to raise children or care for elderly parents, but that's by no means the only reason. It can be for a myriad of things, but a loss of confidence will take place regardless, and regardless of the time as well, which is awful. Shouldn't be the case, and I think it just goes to show how we are not set up to serve these women at the moment, and continually they think they're alone in the process, and they think they're the only ones struggling on their return to work journey. So it's so important to not only address the issue, but to share stories of other women going through it, but also success stories of women that have managed to get back in at their true value and their true worth.
And that speaks to what I'm guessing you're also seeing, which will be that there are some employers who are mindful of this and are putting mechanisms in place, but that is, I'm guessing, a minority. And I'm also really mindful of, so part of my background, I think I mentioned to you when we first spoke, part of my background is as an HR director. And so I was really, really familiar with the that loss of confidence particularly for women coming back after maternity break, even if it was 6 months, a year, which doesn't feel like such a long time. But we also understand, how our identity can get so caught up in our career and the work that we do, that unless that is handled or kind of given sort of honored in some way, it can be so incredibly crippling, actually, when we feel as though that way of being seen, being heard, identity, all of that, if that's not being heard. And I'm really thoughtful about the work that you do, because I know part of your background is psychology. Is that right? Yeah. So your understanding of the core human need feels really, really resonant here. And I'd love to know kind of how that has informed the work that you do too.
Yeah, so I'm a kind of psychologist by trade. I studied it at Cambridge University and looked across the gender spectrum there. But there's some really, really interesting work around the psychology of job applications, or the psychology of application rates in general between men and women, and how, you may have heard the welfare statistic, which is that women will only apply to a role if they tick 100% of the job criteria. And if there's one thing that they think they can't do, that they will not apply to that role. Whereas men typically apply when they're north of 50% qualified. And it's so important because it translates to recruitment managers seeing a sea of male applicants when they put jobs out through conventional platforms like LinkedIn or Indeed, for example. And we know that when women do apply and do get the interview, that they are 18% more likely to land the job. And there's also so much interesting research as well around job descriptions, how they're written, how they're phrased, to actually encourage more women to apply to those roles as well. For example, we know that if the flexibility sentence is moved, literally everything else stays the same, but the flexibility sentence is moved from the bottom of the job description to the top, that will increase female application rates by 30%, which is hugely statistically significant. And you can see why, because psychologically it tells a woman, oh, actually, we're putting it first, we prioritize this, versus, oh, it's perhaps a throwaway comment at the end of the job description. And I think employers are starting to understand this, and there definitely is, I've been seeing some job descriptions recently which have that sentence at the bottom that says, if you think you're not 100% qualified, still apply, which is absolutely brilliant, because that did not exist even a year ago in job descriptions. But there's so much more that can be done with the wording, with the phrasing, with pulling out keywords. We know that if the word parent is used in the flexibility sentence, then the application rates for women increase. I think that's by 24%, because they feel like me as a mum, I'm being called out in this job advert. They want me, they value me, and it's really really interesting. And it's something that we're doing on our platform, where we're pulling out all of these behavioral economic differences in how men and women approach job adverts and employment in general. And we're using them to our advantage to actually nudge women to press the apply button, because we know that they will not do it unless they tick every single box, but they're likely to get the job if they do put that application out there.
It's so interesting, Amelia, because it's just, for me, it's just thrumming with unconscious bias. And actually, I've just done a little kind of like, sort of check back over my time, my time employing people, and sort of thinking about, well, what was it that meant that we as an employer, we did have a lot of women who worked flexible hours. We had husbands and wives, brothers and sisters. We were a very unusual organization. And I think there was reasons for that, but I wasn't conscious of how we were writing in order to attract that audience. It was just that, like, in the heart of the business was that desire. And so that unconscious bias that can come through when an organization has culturally got a predominantly white, middle-class, male, sort of characteristic to its employee base, it's very easy for that to then get reflected in the kind of language that's used in the job application. But listening to you, it's so beautiful to hear such simple and practical guidance that you're able to provide through this research that you've been doing. I mean, really amazing.
Exactly. And there's an interesting, maybe a separate conversation, but a lot of people now turn to AI to do a lot of their daily tasks, which, don't get me wrong, I rely on it a lot, but it can be quite dangerous in the world of job descriptions, because if you're popping some bullet points into ChatGPT, for example, any recruitment managers out there, and asking it to spit you out a job description, it will be written like they've always been written, which is for the male reader. And that is dangerous, really dangerous in my opinion, because it is the data shows that it is decreasing the amount of women that will be applying to those jobs, because it's written in a way that is not compatible to them, and the key things are not drawn out. So they read that job and they don't, it doesn't call out to them as being a place that they necessarily want to work.
And of course, then that denies that employer 50% of their recruitment pool.
Exactly.
as a very sort of basic statistic. But I'm really curious as well, just listening to you sort of use some of those stats to help debunk some of the thinking around what is actually going on with the gender pay gap, because it's very easy to have a kind of binary perception of what's going on. So go on, Amelia, debunk for us.
Honestly, I'm so glad you've asked this, because literally in the past 2 weeks, I was saying to you at the beginning of when we first spoke before we pressed play on recording, we've been getting so many comments in the last couple of weeks from people on our TikToks and on our social media that genuinely don't understand what the gender pay gap is. And I think it's so important for every single person out there to have a proper understanding of it, because people have these very vocal opinions, but they're based on incorrect information. And I think the main thing to understand is that the gender pay gap measures, by definition, the gender pay gap measures the difference between average hourly earnings of men and women as a proportion of men's average hourly earnings. And the key thing here is that it's hourly. So, for example, more women doing part-time work than men, that is not the gender pay gap. That is not the reason for the gender pay gap, because it's based on your hourly earnings. And the key reason why the gender pay gap is large is because the way the data is collected is based on the census. So, for example, if you're a high-flying partner at a law firm and you're an attorney, let's say, you would tick the legal field on the census and put your earnings there. If you're a paralegal or a secretary at a law firm, you would also tick legal and disclose your earnings. And we know that because women re-enter the workforce and they enter lower paying, more administrative fields, like receptionists, in our mum's case, secretaries, they are, although they're in the same bucket in the same sector, because they are earning less, that is why the gender pay gap balloons. So where in our early 20s, the gender pay gap is negligible, it's 0.6%. But when we reach our 30s, it balloons up to 12, 15%. And when we reach our 50s, it's even higher at 22%. And that is the motherhood penalty. That is because women have children, they leave the workforce disproportionately and re-enter into much lower paying fields. And that is why you see the gender pay gap really, really start to widen in our 30s at that childbearing age. And that is what has been coined the motherhood penalty by sociologists. So I think it's really important to understand that it's not more women do part-time work. It's women are re-entering lower paying fields. And this research won the Nobel Prize last year in October. Really interesting research by Claudia Golden from Harvard University, who essentially said that the crux of the gender pay gap is because of differences in men and women taking career breaks and women re-entering lower paying fields.
And it's as simple as that.
Exactly. I've probably rambled too much. I could have said that in a sentence, but I think it's so important to understand.
It really is. It really is. And I'm also curious about the sort of challenges that you've received, because I suspect those challenges are coming from men and women not understanding the actual situation. And I think there's also that it sort of sparks a thought for me here as well around the kind of the importance of women supporting women in returning to work. Because one of the things that I definitely saw in my career, so I worked in financial services, obviously a very male dominated industry traditionally, and I saw a number of examples where very senior women refused to support or encourage the careers of other women as they potentially rejoined or sort of came into the workforce, because there was this sense of, I had to struggle, and so you need to struggle in order to be strong like me. And it kind of came from a place that I think they believed was a good thing. I don't think there was kind of cruelty in there. Conversely, I also saw some incredible examples, women that I was fortunate enough to work for, in fact, all the women that I was fortunate enough to work for, who had a very different approach and had this sense of actually what we need to do is emoliate the system and make it encourage women to apply for roles from potential rather than everything, already fits 100%. So there was this kind of understanding that men will apply for work or apply for roles that women won't apply for, and actually we need to build that sort of confidence in women. But I'd really love to sort of hear a bit more about what Ivee actually is doing to practically help change this, because it's brilliant to know what the problem is. What do we do?
Yeah. So we understand that we need to prioritize the woman and her journey back to work, because I think there's a lot of fluff is maybe the wrong word, but there's a lot out there that focuses on the companies. How can we help you? How can we help you? But actually, we know that it is a journey. It's not as simple as, oh, you'll just find a job and off you go back. We know that there is so much support that needs to happen from the moment a woman maybe even thinks about getting pregnant all the way up until she's at the end of a 25-year career break. So there's a whole spectrum of women that are thinking about their return to work. And it's important to make sure that we're catering for all of them and making sure that we're giving them the support that they need, because a woman that's just found out she's pregnant and thinking about whether she wants to stay in her corporate role is very different from a woman that's returning after 25 years and has no idea what she even wants to do, or she has no idea what she's even good at anymore, which we hear countless times from women that they don't even know what they should re-enter in, because they don't know what they even think that they're good at, or what they even think they want to do.
So Amelia, just to sort of flag, when I left my corporate career for about sort of 3 or 4 years, and for the first couple of years of that, basically out of my mouth would come the phrase, I'm not employable, because I didn't know what I was good at. I mean, and when I look back at that woman now, and I just think, oh my darling, like, you were so employable. You were so, I would love to bring you in to my organization, but in that moment, complete loss of confidence, but not even recognizing it as loss of confidence. And I think that's important as well, just seeing it as like, who would want me?
Exactly, because it's all well and good offering jobs to someone, but if they have no idea what they want to apply for and they haven't been able to narrow their focus down from what sector do I even want to do, what ways of working should I do? Should I be freelance or full time? Should I be compressed hours? Should I be part time? Should I be flexible working? What COVID has done so well for us is it's opened up this huge glossary of flexible working terms. But that's not to say people know exactly what they want out of that glossary. Do people want a hybrid work, remote, full time? There's so much. So with Ivee, we're a community-based platform first and foremost, and we help women return to the workforce after a career break, and we connect them with employers that are really hungry to access this qualified and diverse, but at the moment completely untapped talent. So through our community, we offer networking, mentoring, events and webinars, but also crucially, really coaching these women and making sure that they're in the best position to understand what it is they want to do when they return to work, how they can increase their confidence, and if there's any brushing up on skills, whether that's hard or soft, that they might have lost during their time away. We also crucially help women recognize the skills that they have gained, because there are so many soft skills that you have gained during your time away from the workforce that you might not even realize. Negotiation, conflict resolution, organization, management, all of these things come hand in hand with being a carer, for example, of elderly, or especially of children. And recognizing it is the first step, because a lot of women simply don't think they have those skills. Event management is another classic one where you wouldn't think you've done that, but you have. Of course you have. If you've organized any form of of children's event, parties, parents' evenings, whatever it might be. Um, and crucially, it's finding them a job within our platform. And so what we have is a group of vetted employers who crucially have a workplace that is conducive for a returning woman. So whether that be their flexibility policies, whether that be their culture, we understand that it is a specific type of company these women are looking for, and we don't let any old company on. We make sure that they are a very, very good workplace for our cohort. Another element of the platform, as I mentioned before, is weaving in these psychological tactics to actually encourage the women in our community to press the apply button. So, for example, if an Ivee member is looking at a job description, first of all, that job description is going to be written well and written in a way that stands out to her. But crucially, what our algorithm does is it will scan her profile, it will scan the job advert, it will identify a match, and if she is suited for that role, it doesn't need to be 100%, but she will see a big green button saying, you know, you are qualified for this role, you should consider applying. And as a result, what our employers see is much more qualified female applicants coming through our channel versus LinkedIn, Indeed, you know, all of these other job boards that do not prioritize women.
It's amazing. It's so amazing, Amelia. And I honestly, I'm just sitting here smiling as I listen to you. And I think like one of the things that really stood out for me there was this, the recognition of the skills that we actually have. I mean, you know, as a lesson for life, what a wonderful thing to be highlighting, that, you know, it's so important to recognize what we're bringing, as well as being important to go, okay, well, maybe there is something there that I could learn. You know, it's not about a sort of, you know, a sort of sugarcoating. It's about really clear-eyed identifying what is true and using that, rather than sort of staying kind of stuck in the sort of vague, maybe untruths of I don't really know what I'm doing, or I haven't got any experience there. So there's something incredibly powerful, and I mean, to me, that speaks to your psychology background as well, that understanding.
And the amazing thing about it, about Ivee being a community, is that it's not just professional. I say that in air quotes, but you know, whether it be career coaches, get their guidance and their opinions, but women can turn to other women in the community and say and be vulnerable, because it's such a safe space where women can be so vulnerable and really speak about what's on their mind. Because what we found is actually this is a little bit of a taboo topic that women don't necessarily speak about with their close circles and their friends. Whether it involves, you know, redundancy, salaries, things like that, it's a little bit taboo. And we found that our community really values that they can connect with people that they hadn't known before, form friendships, form networks, yes, but also ask candid questions that then they're not afraid to. And whether that's, for example, we had a woman this morning actually asking, I don't know what I want to do. Can anyone help me? Can anyone share their stories? And we can facilitate connections, and people can, you know, they can connect offline or jump on a call to just speak to other women that might even just be thinking the same thing. And you know, you don't necessarily need to come out of that call with, oh, I know exactly what I want to do now and I'm ready to start applying. But even just say, oh, it's so good to speak to someone that's thinking the same thing as me, because I thought I was completely alone.
Well, that to me also speaks to really creating a space that nurtures the way that women communicate. Because you know, something that I hear in the work that I do is so often a female client will say something like, my husband's wonderful, but when I share a problem, he just wants to give me an answer, and all I want is to be listened to. I mean, it's a constant refrain, really. And so this is also about kind of recognizing, actually just having someone sit beside you and say, oh, I know it's tricky, isn't it? Or I know that sounds hard, and allowing us to reach our own conclusion without being told this is the answer.
Exactly. And don't get me wrong, we provide tools, guidance, sessions to narrow that focus. But yeah, as you say, it's equally just as important to say someone else is struggling too, or
Yeah.
someone else is actually, they were struggling and they have narrowed their focus. Great, it's possible. I can do it.
Yeah.
I can see a role model that has done it successfully after a 20-year career break, for example.
I really love the use of that phrase role model as well, because I think that sort of touches back on, what I was reflecting on in my time in financial services, that there were some really incredible role models and at times not. And I think that what I'm also sort of getting a sense of here is the opportunity for the momentum to build, that once we start shifting this narrative, then that shift takes on its own characteristics, or its own energy, its own dynamism, and um and hopefully it starts to have a wider impact. I'm also really mindful of the fact that you're so careful about the organizations that you allow to post jobs. Um, and so I'm guessing sort of within that is also those organizations really understanding the value to them.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's actually amazing how hungry organizations are for access to our talent pool. And I think that is such a wonderful thing that should be screamed from the rooftops,
Mhm.
because I think a lot of women returning to work, because of this loss of confidence, they think that employers don't want them. And actually it's completely the opposite. Employers are increasingly understanding the real value that women returning to the workforce have. They are experienced first and foremost. They have an average of 8 to 12 years sector experience, which is so highly sought over. And companies know that they're losing women at the mid management level, and they want them back,
Mm.
and they're really scratching their heads for finding new talent pools of female employees, and returners represent such an untapped pool, and it's completely ridiculous that it's been untapped for so long and that there's not been anything connecting this pool with companies at scale. There are some amazing initiatives in the form of returnships, which some companies put on. They are amazing, and they're basically a summer internship for a returner. But the slight issue with returnships is that they're very long and they're very in person, and as a result, they're not scalable because companies can only onboard a handful of women per year onto these returnships. And so at Ivee, what we're doing is we're a scalable tech solution to connect this huge pool of talent with the employers at scale, and facilitate hundreds of hires per day. In an ideal world, we have every woman returning on the platform. In the UK, that's almost 1 million women, which is just absolutely huge. And they're all able to find a job through the platform, crucially at a 0% salary cut versus, in our mum's case, a 60% salary cut.
I'm also sort of thinking about when I think about my generation. So I'm going to be 55, I think, this year, something like that. And I'm really mindful. A lot of the work that I do is supporting women going through menopause, having experienced my own menopause sort of 10 years ago, and recognizing the impact that had for me. And there's sort of one of the kind of often quoted stats is that 1 in 4 women consider leaving work because of their menopause symptoms, and 1 in 10 actually do. And I know that, the impact that has, I call it the menopause wall, actually, because the impact that has is often it's at a time when the bigger jobs become more available. Women in their kind of late 40s, maybe those kind of C-suite roles start becoming available, if that's your career path. And it feels really interesting to me, this interplay between what you're talking about and often the reason why women are leaving the workplace at that point is because of a massive loss of confidence and anxiety and feeling as though they don't know what their place is.
Yeah. And you probably know the statistic better than me. I believe it's 20%. It could be more, but it's women actually don't put themselves up for promotions during the menopause because they feel like they can't take on more work.
Exactly.
Which again exacerbates that gender pay gap even more.
And often will take a pay cut, often will take a lesser role, which might be the right choice for them. But you're right, it obviously will have some kind of impact on that gender pay gap. And so often what we see is that what's happened is that the woman has taken that cut or that lower role really without conversation with her employer, just because she thinks that that's the only route forward. And I think it sort of plays into everything that you've been talking about today, really, that the importance is really understanding the kind of the dynamic of that relationship between women and the workplace, and then creating the best possible conditions to facilitate success. I mean, whatever success means.
Yeah, and it's not just women that are currently employed that leave, but it's also women that are on a career break and they're looking to re-enter the workforce at around that menopausal age, and it just takes such a huge toll on their physical and mental health, to be honest, at the end of the day. And it really can't, and it usually comes at a time in life where perhaps their children have left home and have just started university, and we've spoken to countless women that are there thinking, well, what the hell do I do now? And they just don't know. They know they want to start working again, but they also think, well, who's gonna employ me, a menopausal 55-year-old, 6-year-old, for example. And it's so important at that crucial point to make sure that not only do they have the support they need, but they are also aware that companies want them and companies are looking for their skill set and their experience, because you best believe that they've got it. And not only have they got the hard skills from their, let's say, pre-child career, but they've also got all of the soft skills that they've developed throughout the last 18 years, for example.
And I think a really useful stat, which I can't actually remember the number of it, the number that's inherent in it, but evidence research is now demonstrating that women's ambition actually increases post-menopause. So that's a really interesting sort of interplay there as well. If you've got someone who's sort of wanting to return to the workforce, wanting to like harness this ambition, and yet feeling as though there's literally nowhere that they can go.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I could, again, this is a really interesting channel because returners are fantastic employees in terms of their stickiness, their loyalty, and their retention. The average retention rate for an employee is about 4 years, but for a woman returning to the workforce, it's 8+ years. So it's over double the retention rate, and that is good for business because we know it costs about 30 grand to hire someone new if you lose an employee, and if you're losing them at half of the rate with women returning to the workforce, you're saving so much money on your hiring. And employers are starting to become aware of this, but again, because women returners haven't been prioritized for so long, these kind of statistics aren't top of mind for companies. And so what we're really focused on is making sure that we're getting these statistics in front of companies and saying, actually, you need to be hiring women returners. Not only are they more loyal, but they also make better managers. And there's a lot of research as well around the churn of employees under managers that are women returning to the workforce is much, much lower. And again, that's good for business because you're not losing and you're not having to continuously replace people in your team because you've got a better manager with a higher EQ, more soft skills that can actually retain her team underneath her as well as herself.
It's really interesting. As I'm listening to you, I'm mindful of, you know, one of the things that you sort of shared right at the beginning of our conversation is about the weighting between the number of men who take career breaks and the number of women who take career breaks. And I'd love us just quickly to sort of touch on what you see from the research that you've done and the research you've gathered of what is that experience like for men, you know, generally speaking, when they return to work.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting one because a lot of the common themes are present in men as well. A loss of confidence, a pay cut due to this perceived gap, a skills gap in their CV. And at Ivee, we eventually want to be, you know, the go-to return to work platform for men and women. The reason that we are so focused on women right now is we understand that they are the majority of career breakers. It's about 90-10 in terms of the ratio of the women leaving the workforce versus the men leaving the workforce to raise children, for example. We know that 85% of working women will take a career break at some point in their lives. And so for us, when we launch, because we are, you know, we're a brand new company, we're a startup, it's making sure that we're focusing on, you know, who needs the platform the most right now, and that is women. What is fantastic is that more men are continuing to take paternity leave, and companies are continuing to offer the same parental leave to men and women. The issue at the moment is that not all men take it. I used to work at a bank, and it had equal parental leave for men and women, and I think 1% of men took the full hog. So that's a separate issue, and one that's so important in fixing this motherhood penalty, because the more men that take on, you know, that childcare, the more women can stay in their careers, and the less that pay gap will widen. But yeah, as men continue to take their paternity leave, we will be there for them, you know, and we will have a community that will help facilitate their re-entry, just as we do with women, because we understand that the challenges are very, very similar.
I think that's wonderful. I think that's really wonderful, Amelia. And the rationale behind your strategy really makes sense. But also, I really appreciate the compassion that's in your voice as you're talking about the reality of that situation for men returning as well. And also, of course, there's something about this whole, you know, everything sort of slowly kind of coming into balance so that men feel as though it's okay for them to take that time, and that they're going, you know, they're going to be able to sort of re-enter the workplace, just as for women, hopefully being able to rebalance it so that it's easier for them to re-enter the workplace. It's wonderful. It's so wonderful listening to you. And I'm really mindful of the timing of, you know, you've said this is a startup, the timing of what you and Lydia are doing, and the fact that the Flexible Working Act has just come into force. I mean, that has been, I've sort of watched that battle play out through the Flex Appeal, you know, sort of challenge that has been sort of running on social media, and just so incredibly inspiring, really, to sort of see the work that's gone into that. And I just wonder, you know, as you look at the impact of the Flexible Working Act, how do you see that kind of supporting or informing the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I think it's such a win. It's such a win for women, to be honest, because they're the ones that need it the most. It The act itself, it just allows, well, I guess the kind of the main crux is that it allows women to request flexible working from day one, you know, and that is so important for for women that have caring responsibilities and that need flexibility. I think this act, coming off the back of COVID and all the amazing tailwinds that COVID had for flexible working, just opens up another avenue for women to be able to do both, to be able to work, let's say, from home 2 days a week, for example, and give them the flexibility to do the school run on those 2 days a week, is so important and shouldn't go unnoticed. And I think companies now need to recognize this and make sure that if they can offer flexibility, they need to be putting it front and center, because I think a lot of the time it's hidden, and women have to really look for it and really try and find, okay, who offers good flexible working. Deloitte have a really good, it's almost like top trumps cards, but it's a really interesting marketing technique where they do have these top trumps cards for the different types of flexibility they can offer. And so you can look at them and go, oh, I could do that, or I could do that. And it's all these just like, they're not niche examples, but they're just different examples of what some of their employees do. And it's just, I think, such an interesting way to get across to potential job applicants, look at all of these amazing different things that we can offer.
And that to me sort of speaks of not being kind of rigidly that there is just one way, but to be able to look at a role, to really step back and look at a role and go, well, hang on a minute, just because it's always been done like this doesn't mean that there can't be a change here.
Yeah, I do think as well that there can be seen to be a little bit of a paradox of choice with flexibility, and looking at all of the different options and thinking, oh, does this company offer all of the options, or do they offer just one of the options? Will it be silly if I ask for compressed hours, for example, if I haven't seen anywhere that they offer it? So I think just making sure that everyone's having the conversation. It's one that we have with all of our employers, that we bring onto the platform, or think about bringing onto the platform, that says, actually, did you know there are all of these types of flexible working?
Lovely.
Did you know that you can and should be offering all of them? And we sit down with them, we say, can you offer this? Can you offer this? And actually quantifying it, and then putting it on the platform and saying they can, you can do the school run hours, for example, term time hours, all of these different types of flexibility, because there's so many under the sun. But I think a lot of women, when they're returning, they feel silly asking that, and actually it shouldn't be on them to ask it. It should be on the companies to forthcome that information and say, look, these are all of our different types of flexibility, take your pick.
I benefited hugely from flexible working. I did school time hours, I did school day hours, I worked 3 days a week. As my son sort of grew, like, through his different kind of, like, bits of, like, from nursery through sort of schooling, I was so incredibly fortunate to be able to access that kind of flexible working, which it's just sort of 20 years ago now, which at the time was so unusual. And I think it's just so wonderful listening to you educating organizations about, well, do you know this is available? Because actually some of these might work better for you as an organization than this kind of rigid view of what flexible working is.
A classic example, sorry to interrupt again, but just while you're saying that, a classic example is role share. A lot of organizations, and role share is when you have two employees doing the same role. One works 3 days a week, one works 2 days a week. It's amazing for mothers, and they love role shares and they excel at them. But what's really interesting is companies, when they have a role share, employees, they say the work that is being done in this role share is so much more than what I would get if I had just one employee. And the reason is, inherently, I think if you do, let's say you work 3 days, you do 3 days work in that time, and you're having two employees doing that, and so they find that the productivity in that role is massive, and those that offer them love them and want to do more of them. But loads of companies out there don't even know what a role share is, or what the benefits are of it. They might actually see it as extra admin, and so it's just making sure everyone understands what's out there, is being educated on actually what are the benefits of these flexibility policies.
I think that, I mean, that touches on the other point I was going to make, which is that, you know, with the introduction of the Flexible Working Act, it also means that for those people working in organizations, so maybe in the HR team or in the, you know, sort of managerial leadership roles, it means that they've got something really tangible to be able to like support the stuff that perhaps they've been really wanting to build in to an organization's culture. So actually there can be this kind of change. We know that for some organizations it's going to take a lot more than a law changing, but I think that ultimately this is so incredibly hopeful, actually, talking to you. I'm also, I just want to ask you sort of one last question, really, because I've just realized that I think we could probably talk for a very long time, Amelia. There's, in fact, maybe there's two questions. The first one is, what is the message that you and Lydia would most want women returning to work to remember?
I think the message that we would want them to hear is, you are not alone, and you can do this, because I think it's so important to address that first and foremost. If someone believes that they can return to the workforce with some form of idea and path forward, I think it's completely game changing. Not only in terms of their actions and their plan, but in terms of their mental health as well. I think having that belief in yourself that you can do it, and having that support around you to help you do it, is completely game changing. Because I think a lot of women, they lose themselves in their career break, especially raising children. You've raised children for 18 years, and off they go to university. You feel like you've lost your corporate self, because it has been so long since you last wore that hat. And I think understanding that you're not alone, and that not only can you do this, but there's companies out there that really seek your skills.
Yeah,
I think is that's all it is.
amazing.
And everything else after that will come.
Yeah. So that really clear reminder that you are wanted, I think. I mean, maybe it's like, you know, gosh, that speaks to Maslow's hierarchy of needs and belonging, you know, we all want to belong. And so I suppose it's about creating conditions where that feels possible. So my last question for you is bringing this sort of right back to you, because, you know, you've spoken so passionately about this support that you're giving others. And I just wonder, you know, in terms of where you're at in how you see your own life kind of unfolding, if this time was a chapter in your book of life, what would that chapter heading be?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think the chapter would be a seed. And the reason I say that is because Ivee as a platform is, we're in our infancy, but and the word ivy, it's spelled IVEE, but it's a play on the plant ivy. We were originally actually spelled IVY, but we've rebranded slightly. That's a different story. And the reason that we called the company Ivy is, there's so much symbolism between how the plant ivy grows and women's return to work journey. Ivy needs a little bit of support at the beginning of its life, but once it latches onto a building, off it goes, and it grows on its own towards the sun. And that is so similar to women's return to work journey. Yes, they may need a bit of support at the beginning to get their confidence up and to really narrow their focus. But once they return to the workforce, we know they are so successful, not only for themselves, but for the business that they're in as well. And yeah, I think we're at such an early but exciting stage that we've planted the seeds, and we're ready to start growing, and we're really excited to help every single woman out there that needs us.
Amazing, amazing. So look, I'm going to share, obviously I'll share the link to Ivee, to the platform. And if there's anything else that you think, could be a useful thing for me to share, then please do.
Definitely.
And I'll,
Yeah, I would just say if anyone wants to join, if anyone listening wants to join our community, we're here to welcome you with open arms. And our website is ivee.jobs. And yeah, please join, please introduce yourselves. We're here for one-on-one support. Every new joiner, we give a one-on-one call to, and really try and help understand how can we help you, and how can we understand what you want from us, so that we can give it to you in the best way possible. So yeah, encourage anyone to join that's feeling a bit lost and wants a community around them.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. And actually, Amelia, I was just sort of thinking, does this, just checking in really, I'm guessing this doesn't preclude women who maybe have returned to the workforce but felt like they're not in a place that's really utilizing their skills and their strengths.
Yes, yes. I probably should have said that at the very beginning, actually. But 100%, like in our mum's case, she's so much more than a receptionist, but that is her current job. And anyone that, exactly as you say, isn't on a career break is by no means excluded from the platform. And if you're looking for a career pivot, but you might not know exactly what you want to pivot to, there's there's room for everyone in there. So
Wonderful.
please still utilize us. It's by no means you have to be on a career break at this current point in time.
Yeah. Amazing, amazing. Just such a joy to speak with you. And I know that everybody listening is going to be so supportive of everything that you're looking to do, and also grateful. I suspect there will be a number of people getting in contact with you. So
I'll also say that the platform's completely free. I know that there's some kind of platforms out there that ask for fees, or you pay for coaching. None of that. Ivee is always completely free for the women. It's the companies that we charge on the other side.
brilliant.
So always free for the women.
That's amazing. That's a really, really good bit of additional information as well. Yeah. Fantastic. Thanks so much, Amelia. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, and for kind of shedding light through your platform, about this important issue. It's been so amazing to speak to you.
Oh, okay. Lovely. You take care.
Take care, honey. Bye.
Well, that was wonderful, wasn't it? Gosh, to sit with someone who has so much knowledge about something they are so passionate about, I just find it so inspiring. And I hope you loved listening to Amelia as much as I loved talking with her. I think there's something incredibly powerful about the work that they're doing. And also, I really wanted to introduce that question around what is the impact for men, because of course, it's important that this conversation doesn't become so one-sided that it only becomes about women. And I really, really loved the way that Amelia spoke with such compassion about the reality of what it's like for men to return to work. And, no big surprises here. The challenges are the same. It's just that the challenge is far more widespread for women. I would really, really love to hear any reflections you have. And if you are planning on getting in contact with Ivee, so it's ivee.jobs, ivee.jobs, then, let me know. It'd be great to be able to flag that to Amelia and to Lydia, so that they know, the impact that them talking about this is having. And I also really wanted to call out that last part that Amelia said, which was, well, that it's free. I mean, how brilliant is that? But also that it's there for anyone, any woman who's in the workforce, who's considering that maybe there's something else available for them. And, it doesn't mean that you have to be kind of trying to re-enter the workforce. You could already be within the workforce. And for me, that speaks so deeply to a lot of the work that I do with people who come and work with me, is that, sometimes we just have this sense that a change is needed, but we don't necessarily know what it is. And so maybe part of your route could be to explore the support that Ivee can provide. And also, of course, you can explore the support that I could provide for you as well, if that's something where you feel you want to do some deeper work. So really, really wonderful. And gosh, so exciting to sit and listen to her, and to really feel as though we're part of that seed being planted, and I look forward to seeing how it all grows. Okay, my darlings, if you need me, you know where I am. If you haven't yet joined the mailing list, please do come along. It's hennyflynn.co.uk, and you'll get notified of when each new episode comes out, along with some thoughts and reflections from me. And also you get to hear about other wonderful stuff that I offer too. So if you're not yet part of the mailing list, do come along. And you can always just come and sign up on the website. And I think that is it. Sending you so much love, and a hug and a wave.